All right. What do you guys think about that noise, huh? That is the, what I have here today is the pedalpcb.com Electrovibe. Now this is a Univibe based on the old Shin-Ei Univibes, but this is one feature that I think is really nice compared to the original. Now the original had three knobs. It had the intensity, volume, and speed, and it had that switch between chorus and vibrato. But what it did is it had a expression pedal input, and as long as I've owned a Univibe, I don't think I've ever once used that, because I would just turn the knob for speed, and I didn't really understand having to have that big pedal on the side to control speed. It just didn't make much sense to me. So what pedalpcb.com did is put it on a switch, so we can use speed 1 or speed 2, which is set here. So that's what I did in that intro. I started off on that vibrato setting, which is kind of a little seasick feeling, and then when I started going into that chord progression, got into that chorus, and I slowed the speed down here, which is what speed 1 was, and it just creates that really cool watery feeling. You know, these were supposed to be like a clone of a Leslie, and you can kind of get Leslie-ish, but they're kind of their own thing entirely. So let's talk about some sounds, and then we'll go through the build of this, because it's a really great sounding pedal, and it's a pretty easy build too. So to start it off, here's my cleanish sound. Well, let's be honest. Here's my amp. I'm using a little distortion. Tune down E flat. Okay, so we're going to just monkey around with speed 1. We're going to turn this thing on. And it's pretty easy to demonstrate what we're going to do here. We're in the chorus setting. Okay, so we'll turn the speed all the way down, and we'll dip that intensity up. We're gonna go about halfway. So the best way to think about these controls is it's like a tremolo, right? Your speed is how fast, and the intensity is how deep, essentially, right? How fast are we going to modulate here? So when you start getting up to something like this, and that's getting pretty insane. So let's dial back this intensity a little bit. We'll keep that speed really fast. Alrighty. Now we're going to do the same thing, but turn over vibrato so you can hear what that weirdness sounds like. So right there, it's actually kind of subtle without that intensity getting weird. But when we start doing this, now we're talking. So there we go. Of course, I think like most people, like chorus setting, intensity up. Really want that kind of watery liquid sound. Let's talk about building this thing, because that's why we're here, right? Let's talk about builds. The hardest part about this was probably drilling the enclosure, right? Here's another enclosure I drilled to show you guys. You have to drill the foot switches, right? And then the hardest part is doing a square. I actually had to use a pilot holes around the corners. Then I hit it with a bigger bit in the middle and then used files and a drill bit to kind of get the rest of that out. And that's just if you went with the wider switch like I preferred. I just thought it looked really cool. So that's a challenge, but the cool part is, and I think what's great is that pedalpcb.com is selling this faceplate. So any mistakes you might make on the drilling, you just cover it up with a faceplate and it still looks really cool. Now, the part about this I think for the build for most people is going to be the most challenging is getting it dialed in. And so I'm going to kind of show what I've done to do so. Now, when you build this, and I'm going to flip this around, you're going to see I have a pulsing LED, or I'm sorry, a light bulb. And this is how the Univibe does its vibe, right? It's got these LDRs around it that are detecting the light that's given off by the bulb. Now, there are two trimmers in here. Oops, let me set this over. There's a gain trimmer and a bias trimmer. Now what that does is the gain is going to set how bright we can turn our light bulb. So if I'm turning it down, and now the light bulb, as you can see, it's barely even blinking, but when I crank it up, you'll see that light bulb start to go back. So for me, I like my bulb, it's almost all the way up and just dial a little bit back, okay? So these are the settings I use to get the sound that I like. And then the bias is how the rise and the fall of the between the off and the on of the bulb that's the best way I think to think about what it does. And I have mine almost all the way down. Okay, I think I'm like almost completely off. Yeah. So I have it right, I think it was right about there. Okay, so I'm almost all the way off. Now, that's what I found the sound that I like particularly. So when I built my pedal, I set everything at noon, right? And I just would get a strum a chord and then just kind of turn this over. Okay, is that the sound I want? Do I like the way that is vibing? And just go in there and start dialing in those trimmers back and forth. Now it takes time. There's no real like set, like you can't just be like, oh, turn everything to 2 o'clock and it'll sound great. You kind of have to go in there and muddle around. So using my settings might be a good way if you like this sound. And there's a lot of variations in there for your tone, so you can kind of shape the Univibe to how you like it. I like it like that. I think it sounds great, so that's how I'm going to keep it. But for anybody who builds one, there's no science. Just get to it and start turning and checking it out. It's a fun build, man. My enclosures that I've used for this aren't your normal 1590B. These are the small bear ones that are a little bit taller. So you could actually use a 1590 BBS, which would be really good, or a BBM. Those are a little bit taller. They make sure everything just fits in there nicely. So there you are, guys. pedalpcb.com, Electro.